I was woken up by the sound of her voice, but it wasn't a call for help or a soft whisper in the middle of the night. It was her yelling at me, not in anger, but with this frustration, like she'd been bottling it up for too long. I was still groggy, not fully awake, but I could hear every word she said, each one sharp like a needle. "You don't even know how to be a man anymore," she said, and there was no mistaking the venom in her tone. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in bed, blinking against the harsh light coming through the curtains. What? What are you talking about?" She stood by the doorway, her back to me, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her body language was all sharp edges, like she was preparing for a fight. But I wasn't ready. I had no idea how we got here, but I knew this wasn't how we'd always been. "I've tried to make excuses for you," she continued, her voice trembling now. "I thought maybe you just needed time to figure it out, or maybe it was just a phase. But no, it's not a phase, Darren. It's who you are." I was still too confused to process everything she was saying. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Look at us," she snapped, turning to face me, her eyes burning with a mix of sadness and anger. "Look at what we've become. I'm carrying all of this, and you're just floating. It's like you're not even present in your own life. You don't make decisions, you don't stand up for yourself, you don't even stand up for us. You're just drifting." I was silent, trying to catch up to the whirlwind that had suddenly consumed the room. Was this really happening? Was this my wife, the person who had promised to stand by my side no matter what, telling me that I was not enough? Telling me that I was failing her? And then she said it, the sentence that would change everything. "You're not a real man, Darren." I froze. My heart seemed to stop for a second, my entire world spinning out of control. The words hung in the air like a cloud of poison. I had always been her rock. We had our problems, sure, but this was something different. It wasn't just a critique of what I did or didn't do. It was an attack on who I was. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice small, unsure of what I was even asking. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might soften, might take it back. But she didn't. Instead, she just looked at me, like I was a stranger. "I need someone who can take charge, who isn't afraid to make things happen. I need someone who can be strong, who can lead. You've turned into this person who's just comfortable with nothing. You're not even fighting for us anymore, Darren. You just exist." She paused. "And it's not enough. It never was." I felt like I'd been slapped. Hard. The weight of her words crashed down on me, and for a long moment, all I could do was sit there, feeling like a shadow of myself. This wasn't just about her frustration. This was about something bigger, something I had failed to see until now. But what struck me the hardest was not her words, but the truth in them. I had become complacent. I had become someone who went through the motions, someone who lived life on autopilot. And in doing so, I had slowly, quietly, been losing the woman I loved. I thought about the last few months, how I had kept my head down at work, how I'd let my own dreams fade into the background, how I'd become so caught up in the mundane that I couldn't even remember the last time I had done something for myself, or for us. How long had I been like this? How long had I been letting my life slip away? She was right, and that realization hit me harder than anything she could have said. I hadn't been a man, not the way she needed, not the way I needed. But there was something else stirring in me now, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't going to just sit back and let this happen. I wasn't going to let her words be the final chapter. I stood up, suddenly feeling a burst of energy that had been missing for who knows how long. "If that's what you need, Lila, then I'll give it to you," I said, my voice firm, my mind already racing with the changes I needed to make. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was serious. And maybe, in that moment, neither was I. But deep down, I knew I had to change. Not for her, but for myself. That night marked the beginning of something new. Something that would test everything I thought I knew about myself, about our marriage, about life itself. But what I didn't realize in that moment was that this wasn't just about becoming the man she wanted me to be. This was about discovering who I really was, and the cost of that discovery would be higher than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I woke up early. I wasn't sure if it was the weight of what happened or just the adrenaline from the previous night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had just been turned upside down. Lila had fallen asleep on the couch, still wrapped in the same frustration she'd carried into the conversation. I didn't bother waking her up, knowing that whatever I did next, it wasn't going to be easy. I needed time. Time to think, to really understand what had gone wrong, and most importantly, to figure out what to do about it. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, a habit I'd picked up over the years. The steam rose from the mug, and for a moment, it felt like everything was normal again. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That conversation we had the night before, it wasn't just a fight. It was a revelation. She'd said things I had never thought she would say. And now, I was left with this nagging question. Was it too late to fix things? Or was I so far gone that I couldn't even recognize myself anymore? As the hours passed, I found myself pacing around the house, unable to focus. The world felt too quiet, like there was this invisible tension in the air. The clock ticked loudly in the background, and the thought kept gnawing at me. What kind of man had I become? The kind of man who had been so absorbed in his own comfort, in the predictable, in the quiet safety of routine, that he had lost touch with the one person who mattered most? I needed a plan. I had to prove her wrong. Not just to her, but to myself. I wasn't going to be that passive, quiet guy anymore. I was going to take control of my life, of my marriage, of everything I'd let slip away. But where do you even begin when you've spent years avoiding the hard truths? I decided to start small. But the first step wasn't an easy one. I had to confront the truth that I had been hiding from. The truth that I had allowed myself to become invisible in my own life, to let things drift instead of actively steering the ship. I wasn't just going to change the way I acted in the world. I had to change the way I saw myself. I picked up the phone and called a friend of mine, someone who'd known me before I met Lila. Back when I was still, well, a different version of myself. He was a guy who lived life on his terms, who didn't apologize for being bold, for pushing the limits, for making mistakes, but owning them. He wasn't perfect, but he was real, something I hadn't been in a long time. "Hey man," I said when he picked up. "It's Darren. I need some advice." "Whoa, hold on," he said, his voice sounding a little too surprised. "You actually need advice? Darren, you're the guy who has everything figured out." I chuckled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, well, that's the problem. I don't have anything figured out anymore. I've been stuck in this rut, and I don't even know how to get out of it." He was silent for a moment, probably trying to process what I had just said. "Okay, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "It's Lila. She said I'm not a real man, that I'm just existing, you know? And I don't know if she's right, but something in me snapped. I need to change. I don't want to lose her, man. I've got to find a way to fix this." There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, I could hear the seriousness in his voice. "You've got to stop thinking like that. You've got to stop thinking you're broken. You're not broken, man. You've just forgotten who you really are. You've got to stop being so afraid of failure. You've got to embrace the fact that it's okay to make mistakes." His words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because they were exactly what I needed to hear, or maybe because I knew he was right. I'd been running from failure my whole life, terrified of taking risks, terrified of being vulnerable. But I was tired of being afraid. Tired of being the guy who couldn't speak up, who couldn't take charge. I wasn't that person. Not anymore. "All right," I said, my voice steadier now. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to take control. I'll start with the small things first. I'll show her I can be that guy." My friend let out a laugh, but it wasn't mocking. It was encouraging. "Good. That's the spirit. But remember, don't just do it for her. Do it for you. Do it because you've been hiding from the guy you used to be." I hung up the phone with a new sense of purpose, but it didn't feel easy. It felt like a burden, like the weight of all the years of complacency were on my shoulders. The fear of failing again, of not being good enough, it was still there. But something in me had shifted. I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep being the man Lila had called out. I had to prove to myself that I was more than that. Over the next few days, I started making changes. Small ones at first. I started standing up for myself at work, taking on responsibilities I'd been avoiding. I started making decisions on my own, no longer waiting for someone else to tell me what to do. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just change the surface level stuff. It wasn't enough to just play the part. I needed to dig deeper. I needed to show Lila that I was someone worth fighting for. One afternoon, I took a walk through the park near our house, trying to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. But even in the beauty of the moment, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was on the edge of something I couldn't control. I wanted to change, I needed to change, but was it even possible to turn back time? Was it possible to rebuild what had already started to fall apart? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. Little did I know, the journey I was about to take wouldn't just challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, about trust, and about the lengths we're willing to go to for the people we care about. It's strange how your world can feel both heavy and weightless at the same time. I had made a decision to change, to stop being the passive version of myself that Lila had grown so frustrated with. But in truth, I didn't even know where to begin. How do you unlearn a lifetime of habits that have defined who you are, only to become someone else entirely? For years, I had been hiding behind a mask, comfortable, invisible, and predictable. But now, there was this gnawing pressure to tear that mask off, to expose the parts of myself I'd long buried. And with every step I took toward this new version of me, I felt more lost than ever. It wasn't just about acting differently in front of Lila. It was deeper than that. I needed to prove to myself that I could stand tall, that I could step into the life I had always been too afraid to fully embrace. But the fear still lingered in the back of my mind. What if I failed? What if this entire journey turned out to be just another false hope? For the first time in my life, I was determined to confront that fear, even if it meant risking everything. I decided to start with something that had always been difficult for me, taking charge of situations. I had spent so much of my life avoiding confrontation, letting things slide, convincing myself that if I kept my head down and stayed out of the way, everything would eventually be okay. But it wasn't okay. Not anymore. And certainly not in my marriage. The first real test came just a couple of days after our conversation. Lila and I were sitting at the kitchen table, having breakfast in awkward silence. I could tell she was still processing everything, and honestly, I didn't blame her. I was still processing it too. But this time, I wasn't going to let the silence hang there. I wasn't going to let it fester into something worse. Lila, I said, setting my coffee cup down with more force than I intended, making her look up from her phone. We need to talk about this. About us. She looked at me, her brow furrowing. I thought we already talked about this, Darren. We didn't talk about everything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You said I wasn't a real man. I want to know what you mean by that. I want to understand, really understand, where you're coming from. She sighed, clearly not thrilled by the idea of revisiting the topic, but she didn't shut me down either. I told you what I meant. You don't take charge of anything. You don't push for what you want. It's like you're okay just letting things happen to you instead of making them happen. And I need more than that. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her, trying to show her I was listening, trying to show her that I wasn't just hearing her words. I was feeling them, too. Okay, I get it. But I need you to understand something. I've been this way because I thought that's what you wanted. I thought if I just went along with everything, everything would be fine. But I see now that it's not. I've been passive, and I've been letting you carry everything. And I'm not going to do that anymore. She blinked at me, surprised by the directness in my tone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly speaking to her, not just the version of myself that had been hiding behind walls of indecision. So, what's your plan then, Darren? You just wake up one day and decide to change? I nodded slowly, my voice calmer now, but my words firm. Yeah, I do. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm not going to sit back and wait for life to happen to me anymore. I'm going to start making decisions. I'm going to take charge. Not just for you, but for me, too. She was quiet for a moment, as though she were weighing my words. Finally, she gave a small nod. I guess I'll believe it when I see it. Her words stung, but in a way, they motivated me even more. It wasn't enough just to say I was going to change. I had to prove it. To her. To myself. After that conversation, I felt the weight of my commitment more than ever. I had set the bar higher than I'd ever thought possible. It wasn't just about being assertive in front of Lila. It was about changing the way I lived. Changing the way I thought. No more being passive. No more waiting for permission. If I was going to transform, I needed to throw myself into this challenge completely, without hesitation. Over the next few days, I made small but intentional changes. I started with work, taking on more responsibilities without waiting for someone else to tell me what to do. I began pushing for things I wanted, whether it was a new project or just an idea for a team meeting. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was stepping out of the shadows, not waiting to be told what to do, but taking the reins myself. But that was the easy part. The real challenge came when I tried to apply this new mindset to my relationship with Lila. We hadn't spoken much since our breakfast conversation, and I knew that in her mind, this was all just a temporary thing. She didn't believe I could change, and honestly, I wasn't sure I could either. But there was something inside me now, something I couldn't ignore, a spark of confidence I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't enough to just talk the talk. I had to show her that I could walk the walk. One evening, a week after our conversation, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Lila had been working on a new photography project for days, and I could tell she was getting frustrated with the lack of progress. In the past, I would have stayed out of her way, hoping she'd figure it out on her own. But tonight was different. I walked into her studio, where she had scattered photos and equipment all over the place. "Hey," I said, surprising her as I leaned against the doorframe. "I think I know what's wrong with this." She looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Really? You think you know?" "Yeah," I said, a little more confidently than I felt. "I think it's missing a certain angle. What if you try shooting from the other side? I bet it'll change everything." She stared at me for a moment, unsure whether I was being serious or just offering unsolicited advice. But then she put down her camera and walked over to the other side of the room, as if considering my suggestion. When she came back, a few hours later, the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. "You were right," she said, her voice a little softer. "That made a huge difference." I smiled, feeling a rush of pride, but also something deeper, something that told me that this wasn't just about the photos. It was about proving to both of us that I could still be the person she needed me to be, the person I had stopped being for far too long. But what I didn't realize was that this small victory, this shift in our dynamic, would set off a chain of events neither of us were prepared for. It would push us further apart before we had a chance to truly come together. And the consequences of this newfound confidence would be more than I could handle on my own. The change I'd initiated in my life felt like a new chapter, but I quickly learned that the cost of transformation wasn't just about effort. It was about the consequences of what you left behind. It wasn't just about proving to Lila that I could be the man she wanted. It was about confronting all the parts of me that had been dormant for too long. But nothing in life is ever as simple as you want it to be, and I was starting to realize that the road to becoming someone better isn't paved with easy decisions. The small victory with Lila over the photos had been a moment of pride, but it wasn't enough. It didn't fix anything. Not really. It didn't change the fact that I still felt like I was standing at the edge of something too big to fully grasp. I had started something, but I wasn't sure I was prepared for the ripple effects it would create. Over the following weeks, I kept pushing myself. I kept striving to become the person I had promised to be, not just for Lila, but for myself. I changed the way I spoke, the way I carried myself, even the way I interacted with people at work. It wasn't easy. The old habits were like ghosts, following me around, whispering that I wasn't cut out for this, that I was only pretending to be something I wasn't. But I refused to listen. I had made up my mind, and I was going to see it through, no matter how uncomfortable it got. And it did get uncomfortable. There were moments when I would catch Lila watching me, like she was waiting for me to slip up. She wasn't sure if this new version of me was just a temporary reaction to our argument, or if it was real. I could see it in her eyes, doubt. I couldn't blame her. I wasn't sure if I believed it myself, but I was determined to make her see the change. But what I didn't expect was how much harder things would get. The more I tried to prove myself, the more distant Lila seemed to become. She didn't reject me outright, but I could feel the distance growing. She was cold, distant, not in the same way as before, but more like she was waiting for me to mess up. Every time I made a decision or took charge of something, she'd become more guarded. And the thing is, I wasn't sure if it was me she was pulling away from or if it was the person I had once been, the person I had convinced her was unworthy. I started to see a pattern in our interactions. When I made moves to take control of our life, she'd agree with me at first, but the moment I showed any sign of vulnerability, any hint of insecurity, she'd retreat back into herself. It was like a game I didn't understand, a dance where I was always 2 steps behind, trying to catch up. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find her sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. It had been a quiet day, and I thought we could relax for a bit. But as soon as I stepped into the room, I could feel it, the tension, the same coldness that had been there for weeks. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Hey," I said, sitting down next to her, my voice tentative. She glanced at me, but there was something in her gaze that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the warmth I had once seen in her eyes. It was guarded. "Hey," she replied, barely lifting her head. "How was your day?" I could tell she was distracted, but I pushed forward anyway. I wasn't going to let this moment slip away. "Lila, we need to talk about this," I said, my voice firm, but not demanding. "About us." Her eyes narrowed slightly, as though she were anticipating the conversation I was about to bring up. "What about us?" she asked, her tone neutral, but I could tell she was already bracing for something she didn't want to hear. "I'm trying, Lila," I said, the words rushing out before I could stop them. "I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to change. And I need you to meet me halfway. I can't keep doing this alone." She sighed, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to say something, but she wasn't sure what. "I know you're trying," she said slowly, her voice almost apologetic. "But I don't know if you're changing for the right reasons. You're doing all this to fix things between us, but it feels like you're just changing for me, not for you." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I'd thought that by changing, by stepping up, I'd be able to fix everything. But it seemed like it wasn't enough. I wasn't just supposed to change for her. I was supposed to change for myself. But the reality was, I had no idea what that even meant. "What do you want me to do, Lila?" I asked, the frustration creeping into my voice. "I've been trying everything. I've been pushing myself in ways I never thought I could. But nothing is making a difference. You're still distant. You're still pulling away from me." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "I know, and I hate that it's like this. But I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when I'm not sure if I even recognize you anymore." Her words stung, but they also made something inside me click. I had been so focused on proving myself, on trying to change who I was, that I hadn't taken the time to consider what I really wanted, what I needed. I had been so fixated on her expectations that I had forgotten to ask myself, what is the real reason I'm doing this? Was I changing for her, or was I changing because I needed to? I leaned back in the chair, my mind racing. I thought I was doing everything right, but the truth was, I didn't know what right even looked like anymore. I had no idea how to fix this, and it wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about rebuilding something that had been broken for so long that I wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that I had everything under control. I wasn't sure if the changes I was making were for the better, or if they were just leading me down a path I wouldn't be able to come back from. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. A week had passed since our conversation, and the distance between Lila and me was becoming more palpable. The air in our house felt thicker, charged with unspoken words. I kept pushing myself harder, trying to show her that I could be the man she needed. But no matter what I did, it didn't seem to be enough. I thought I had figured it out. Make decisions, take charge, lead the way, but it wasn't working. The more I tried, the more distant she became. It wasn't that she was overtly cold or mean. No, she was still there physically, still going through the motions, but emotionally, she was checked out. There was this wall between us now, a wall I had helped build, even though I didn't fully understand why it was there. One night, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection, asking myself if I had made a mistake. Was this change even real? Was it too late to go back to the way things were before all of this started? But deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The question wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward. But how? How could I fix what had been broken without losing myself in the process? Lila's silence was suffocating. I had become more decisive, more assertive, but she wasn't responding the way I had hoped. I could see it in her eyes, this quiet disappointment, like she was waiting for me to prove that I could truly be the man she wanted. But every time I took a step forward, she took 2 steps back. It was like I was chasing something I could never catch. The turning point came one evening when Lila asked me to join her for dinner outside. We had a little garden in the backyard, nothing fancy, just a small space with a few chairs, some string lights, and a table where we'd sit on warm nights. It used to be our spot, the place where we would unwind after a long day, the place where everything felt right. But that night, there was something different. The atmosphere was heavy, like both of us knew that something was about to change. I sat down across from her, trying to keep the conversation light, but the tension in the air was undeniable. We barely spoke at first, each of us pretending to be busy with our plates, avoiding eye contact. But eventually, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Darren, I think I need to be honest with you about something." I set my fork down, the sudden seriousness in her tone catching me off guard. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened in the past few weeks. And the truth is, I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm not sure we can make it work." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to say something, to defend myself, but no words came out. I had always thought that once I showed her I could change, once I became the man she wanted, everything would fall into place. But it wasn't that simple, was it? "Lila, wait. I don't understand," I stammered. "I've been trying. I've been making all these changes. I'm not the person I was before. I know, Darren," she interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you're trying. But the thing is, I'm not sure who you are anymore. The changes you're making, they don't feel like you. It feels like you're just trying to be someone you think I want you to be, instead of, I don't know, just being you." Her words cut deeper than I expected. I thought I had been making these changes for myself, to prove to her that I could be better, that I could step up and be the man she needed. But I hadn't realized until that moment that in the process of trying to become someone else, I had lost who I really was. "You're right," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on becoming what you want, that I haven't even stopped to think about what I want, what I need." The silence between us stretched out, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I was terrified of losing her, but I also knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep changing for the sake of someone else. I needed to figure out who I was, what I truly wanted from life, from our relationship. If we were going to make it, I couldn't just be a version of myself that fit into her expectations. I had to be me, in the rawest, most honest form. "I think we both need to take a step back," she said quietly, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Maybe we need to figure out who we really are, not as a couple, but as individuals. Because right now, it feels like we're both lost." Her words stung, but they also resonated in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe we had both been so focused on fixing the relationship that we had forgotten to fix ourselves. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "I think you're right. I think we've been running from ourselves for too long." We didn't talk much more that night. There was nothing else to say, really. I could tell Lila was drained, emotionally exhausted, and honestly, so was I. I knew that we needed to take some space to figure things out. But what did that even mean? Would taking a break help us find our way back to each other? Or would it be the beginning of the end? The next few days were a blur. We both went through the motions of daily life, working, eating, existing in the same house, but the distance between us was undeniable. I couldn't help but feel like I was teetering on the edge of something bigger than either of us. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the biggest question wasn't whether or not we could fix our relationship. It was whether we could fix ourselves. Because before we could fix each other, we both needed to find our way back to who we really were. I wasn't sure how this was going to end. I wasn't sure what the future held for us. But I knew one thing for sure. The journey to finding myself, and us, was only just beginning. And there was no way I could turn back now. The days that followed were a strange limbo. It was as if we were both living in a suspended moment, waiting for something to change, but not sure what that change would look like. The space between Lila and me grew longer, the silence more pronounced, and each passing day felt like another step toward an inevitable conclusion. We weren't talking much, at least not about anything real. Small talk was all that remained, polite exchanges about work, the weather, trivial things that didn't matter. We were like strangers sharing a house. Two people who had once been deeply intertwined, but were now lost in a fog of unspoken doubts and fears. I spent hours in my own head, replaying everything that had happened. The arguments, the silence, the moments of connection, and the even more painful moments of separation. I had tried so hard to become someone I thought she wanted me to be, someone I thought would fix everything. But I hadn't stopped to consider what it would mean for me to change for someone else. Who had I become in this process? Was I even still me? There were times when I caught myself staring at my reflection in the mirror, wondering where the man I used to be had gone. I used to be confident, I used to have a clear sense of who I was, where I was going. But lately, I had felt like a shadow of that person, like I was playing a part in my own life. And the more I tried to make things work, the more I felt like I was losing the very thing I was fighting for, myself. Lila had stopped pushing me. I knew she had been waiting for me to make a mistake, to show her that the changes weren't real. And I wasn't sure if I could blame her. I had spent so much of our relationship in a passive state, avoiding confrontation, avoiding responsibility. Now that I was stepping up, it must have seemed like an act, like I was only doing it to get her back, not because I truly understood what it meant to change. I couldn't ignore the fact that I had been afraid of failure my entire life. Afraid of being the wrong kind of man, the kind of man who didn't live up to expectations, my own and everyone else's. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I had been failing not because I wasn't enough, but because I hadn't been true to who I was. I had allowed myself to be defined by what I thought others wanted me to be, by what Lila wanted me to be. I needed to do something. I needed to take control of my life in a way that wasn't about trying to be someone I wasn't. It wasn't about becoming the perfect partner. It was about becoming the person I wanted to be, the person who could stand on his own and make his own decisions, without looking for validation from anyone else. But even with this new determination, I found myself stuck in an odd place. Lila and I hadn't talked about anything real in days. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move, but neither of us wanted to be the one to break the silence completely. I knew I had to be the one to do it, to make the decision to confront the hard truths that we were both avoiding. I couldn't go on like this, not knowing where we stood, not knowing if this was something that could be fixed or if it was already too late. I needed to find a way to open up the lines of communication again, to show Lila that I wasn't just changing for her, I was changing for me. But I didn't know if she would even believe me. That night, I decided to take a chance. I came home from work, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say to her, but not sure how to say it. I found her in the kitchen, making dinner, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't turn around when I entered, but there was something in the air, the quiet tension that told me she knew I was there. "Lila," I said, my voice steady but unsure. "Can we talk?" She didn't respond right away, but I saw her pause, her shoulders stiffening. After a long moment, she slowly turned around and met my gaze. There was no anger in her eyes, no frustration, just a quiet weariness. "About what?" she asked, her voice almost too calm. "I've been thinking," I started, my words coming out slower than I intended. "About everything. About us. About the changes I've been making, the way I've been pushing myself to be someone else. And the truth is, I've been doing all of this because I thought it was what you needed. But I never stopped to think about what I need. I've been so focused on fixing things, on proving something to you, that I've forgotten who I am. And I think I've been lying to both of us in the process." Her eyes softened, but there was still a distance between us, a space that felt impossible to bridge. "So, what are you saying, Darren?" "I'm saying that I don't want to keep pretending anymore," I said, taking a step closer to her. "I don't want to keep changing into someone I'm not just to make this work. I want to find a way to make things work because we both want it, not because I'm trying to be someone else." She was silent for a long time, her gaze shifting from my face to the floor, her mind clearly racing. And for a moment, I thought she might say something that would send everything crashing down. But then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I don't know what we're supposed to do, Darren," she said, almost as though she were speaking to herself. "I don't know if this is something we can fix. But I do know that I can't keep going like this, feeling like I'm waiting for you to become something you're not. I need to know that you're not just changing for me, for this relationship. I need to know that you're doing this for yourself, for who you truly are." Her words landed heavily in the room, and I realized that we weren't just at a crossroads in our relationship. We were at a crossroads in our lives. I had been so focused on changing who I was to meet expectations that I had forgotten what it meant to truly change from within. To be the person I wanted to be, not just the person I thought I should be. "I am," I said quietly, my voice steady now. "I am doing this for me, Lila. I'm not going to keep pretending that I can be something I'm not. I need to find who I really am, whether that means losing everything or not." She didn't say anything for a moment, but when she finally looked up, I saw a hint of something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. A flicker of hope. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if it was hope for our relationship or hope for something else. for both of us to find our way back to ourselves. But in that moment, I realized that the journey I had started wasn't just about fixing my marriage. It was about fixing me. And as hard as it was to admit, I had no idea where that journey would lead. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, each one dragging on like a slow-moving river, its currents pulling us further apart. I could feel it more acutely now, the tension in the air between Lila and me, the silent chasm that had formed between us. I had made my decision. I had opened up to her about my need to change, to stop pretending, to start living authentically. But the question still hung over me like a dark cloud. Was it enough? Could we even begin to bridge the gap that had grown so wide? Lila didn't push me away, but she didn't exactly welcome me back with open arms either. Her silence wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was distant. She was present, physically, but emotionally, she seemed to be holding something back. And I knew why. She was waiting. Waiting to see if I could really stick to the promises I had made. Waiting to see if this change in me was real, or just a temporary response to the pressure of our failing relationship. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't sure either. Every day, I wondered if I was making the right decisions, if the person I was becoming was someone I could truly be. I had told her I was changing for myself, but part of me still questioned whether I was just trying to salvage what was left of my marriage. The fear of losing her weighed on me heavily. It was a quiet kind of fear, the kind that gnaws at you late at night when you're left alone with your thoughts. But there was another kind of fear too, the fear that maybe, just maybe, this was the end, and I had no idea how to stop it. It wasn't until the weekend that things finally came to a head. We were sitting in the living room, a rare, quiet moment between us. The tension had reached a point where even the smallest movements felt like they could break something, like the slightest touch could shatter whatever fragile connection remained. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of the trees outside in the wind, but there was nothing between us, no connection. It felt like we were strangers, sharing the same space, but not really inhabiting it together. Lila was sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone, while I was standing by the window, looking out at the world, but feeling disconnected from it all. And then, without warning, she spoke. "You don't get it, do you?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was something in it that made my heart stop for a moment. I turned around to face her, a lump forming in my throat. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the weight of her words sinking in already. She set her phone down on the coffee table and looked at me. "I've been trying, Darren. I've been trying to give you the space to be the person you want to be the person you think you need to be. But I don't know if I can keep doing this." Her words cut through me like a knife. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weariness that had built up over weeks, maybe months. It wasn't just the relationship she was struggling with. It was the constant battle inside herself, between wanting to hold on to me and realizing that holding on might only be holding her back. "I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything is okay when it's not," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can keep waiting for you to figure out who you are, or if I even have a place in that person's life. It's not about what you're doing, Darren. It's about us. And maybe, just maybe, we're not supposed to be together anymore." The words hit me like a freight train. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I felt like I was drowning. This wasn't what I had expected. It wasn't what I had been preparing myself for. I had thought that by changing, by making these massive shifts in who I was, I could somehow fix everything. I could fix us. But now, standing there in front of her, it felt like the damage was too deep, the cracks too wide. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't something that could be fixed. "I've been so focused on changing for you," I said, finally finding my voice, though it sounded weak even to my own ears. "I've been trying to be someone I'm not, thinking that if I could just get it right, everything would fall into place. But maybe I've been doing this all wrong. Maybe I need to figure out who I am, not just for you, but for me, because I don't even know who I am anymore." Lila didn't speak right away. She just stared at me, as though she were searching for something in my eyes, something she needed to see before she could make her next move. I could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was trying to decipher whether the man standing in front of her was the man she had once loved, or just a stranger in disguise. Finally, she spoke again, but this time her voice was softer, more resigned. "I don't know what's left to fix, Darren. I don't know if there's anything left for us to save." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. I had thought that by changing, by making myself into the man I thought she needed, I could somehow save us. But what if this was beyond saving? What if we had reached the end of the road, and all my efforts to fix it had only pushed us further apart? "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I need to know who I am again. I need to know that I'm not just waiting for something to change. I need to feel like I'm living, not just surviving." I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say. I had no answers for her, no grand declarations of how we could fix everything. The truth was, I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know if it could be fixed. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Maybe Lila was right. Maybe the changes I had been making weren't enough because I had been focusing on the wrong things. I hadn't been focusing on us. I had been focusing on fixing the parts of me that I thought would make me better for her. But I hadn't even stopped to ask myself if that was the right path. The silence between us grew heavy, thicker with each passing second. I wasn't sure how to bridge the gap that had grown between us. I wasn't sure if I could. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Sometimes, change isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes, you have to face the truth that no matter how hard you try, some things can't be fixed. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of those things. The days after that conversation were some of the hardest of my life. Lila and I had reached a breaking point, but it wasn't the end. We were standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether we would fall or find a way to climb back. The silence between us was deafening, but instead of drowning in it, I chose to reflect. I chose to take a step back and truly think about everything that had led me to this moment. I realized something crucial during those quiet days. I had been so focused on becoming someone else to fix the relationship that I had forgotten to reconnect with who I really was. I had been looking for approval, validation, and love from someone else, but in doing so, I had neglected the most important thing, loving myself first. It wasn't about changing for Lila or for anyone else. It was about finding the strength within myself to be who I truly was, without the fear of failing. Lila had been right. I had been living for the wrong reasons, trying to fit a mold I wasn't meant to fit into. But the person I needed to be wasn't someone I could fabricate. It was someone I already was, buried under layers of self-doubt and fear. The truth was, I didn't need to change myself for her, for anyone. I needed to change for me, to embrace who I was, flaws and all. A week after that tough conversation, I decided to do something different. I wasn't going to approach Lila with more promises of change or more talk about fixing things. Instead, I took a deep breath and went to her, sitting down beside her without an agenda. There was no grand speech, no declarations of everything I was going to do differently. There was just the quiet truth. "Lila," I said softly, looking into her eyes, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I don't have all the answers. But I do know this, I want to be with you. Not because I'm trying to be someone else, but because I want to be the person you deserve. But more than that, I want to be the person I deserve. I've been so lost in trying to be perfect for you that I forgot to be real. But I'm learning, and I'm ready to be the man I am. No more pretending." She was silent for a moment, and I could feel her weighing my words. Then, to my surprise, she reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, comforting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm between us. "I've been waiting for you to figure that out," she said quietly, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I needed to see you truly wake up to who you are. And I guess I needed to wake up to who I am, too. I've been holding back too, Darren. I've been afraid to let go of the idea of who we were, but maybe we need to build something new. Maybe we need to stop trying to fix what's broken and start fresh." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. For the first time in weeks, the tension between us had eased. We weren't perfect. We weren't fixed. But we were finally seeing each other, truly seeing each other, for who we were, not who we thought we needed to be. That evening, we went for a walk together, hand in hand, not speaking much, but knowing that something important had shifted between us. It wasn't about grand gestures or promises of perfection. It was about understanding that relationships, like people, aren't perfect. They're about growth, about learning together, and about accepting each other, flaws and all. As we walked, I realized something else. This wasn't just about Lila and me. This was about me learning to accept myself, To stop hiding behind the version of me I thought I should be and start embracing the person I really was. I wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but that was okay. The imperfections were what made us real, what made us human. Over the weeks that followed, we both began to change. Not because we were trying to fix each other, but because we were allowing ourselves to grow, to learn, and to rebuild the foundation of our relationship from a place of honesty and self-awareness. It wasn't an easy journey, and it wasn't one that had a neat, tidy conclusion. But it was real, and that made all the difference. Our love didn't need to be perfect, it just needed to be ours. And in that quiet understanding, we both found the peace we had been searching for. The journey wasn't over, but it had started on a new path, one where we didn't need to pretend anymore. And that was the greatest gift of all.